study session 7, Perception and Sensation. Introduction. In this study session, we will explore theories related to sensation and perception. Although intimately related, sensation and perception plays two complementary but different roles in how we interpret our world. Sensation refers to the process of sensing our environment through touch, taste, sight, sound, and smell. This information is sent to our brains in raw form, where perception comes into play. Perception is the way we interpret these sensations and therefore make sense of everything around us. Through this session, you will construct ideas of how our senses work and how this information is organized and interpreted. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define and use correctly the terms in bold. Perception, sensation, perceptual constancy, form perception, motion perception, absolute threshold, difference threshold, sensory adaptation. And 2. Point out the organs of perception. Meaning of perception. The Oxford Dictionary of Psychology defines perceive as to become aware of something through the senses or to comprehend or grasp a stimulus. A sense is any of the faculties by which one experiences the external world or the internal state organ. Perception could therefore be defined as the process, act, or faculty of perceiving. It involves the neurological processes by which such recognition and interpretation are effected. In sum, perception means insight, intuition, or knowledge gained by perceiving, as well as the capacity for such insight. Relationship between perception and nervous system. Perception arises from the subjective experiences of objects or events that ordinarily result from stimulation of the receptor organs of the body. This stimulation is transferred or encoded into neural activities by specialized receptor mechanisms. The stimulus is relayed to more central regions of the nervous system, where further neural processing occurs. Most likely, it is the final neural processing in the brain that underlies or causes perceptual experience, and so perception-like experiences can sometimes occur without external stimulation of the receptor organs, as in dreams. Perception and psychology. In contemporary psychology, interest generally focuses on perception or the apprehension of objects or events, rather than simply on sensation or sensory process. While no sharp line of demarcation between these concepts exists, it is fair to say that sensory qualities are generally explicable on the basis of mechanisms within the receptor organ, whereas object and event perception entails higher level activity of the brain. Terms related to perception and sensation. Perceptual constancy. This means that the perceptual properties of objects remains remarkably constant, despite variations in distance, slant, and rotational locus caused by movements of the observer. Examples of perceptual constancy are size (except at very great distances, an object appears the same size whether seen nearby or far away, although the size of its image on the retina can be very different. Shape A circle seen from the side is perceived as a circle, although it appears as an ellipse on the retina. Orientation in brackets. Objects appear to keep the same orientation in space independently of the orientation of the observer's head. And position in brackets. A fixed object remains perceived as stationary even when its image on the retina moves because of eye or head movements. Form perception. This means the experience or recognition of a shaped region in the field. Recognition means the experience that the shape is familiar. Identification means that the function of meaning or category of the shape is known. For those who have never seen the shape before, it will be perceived but not recognized or identified. For those who have, it will be perceived as a certain familiar shape and also identified. Recognition and identification obviously must be based on past experience, which means that through certain unknown processes, memory contributes to the immediate experience that one has, given the qualities of familiarity and meaning. Motion perception. Perceived movement cannot simply be explained by the motion of an object's retinal image, since image motion caused by observer or eye movement does not lead to perceived object movement. Moreover, an object tracked by smooth pursuit eye movement will appear to move, although in that case, there is essentially no motion of the object's image over the retina. Similarly, an after image will appear to move during eye movement, even in a completely darkened room, where ordinarily the movement of the retinal image caused by the moving eye is computed to signify no object motion, thus yielding position constancy. In brackets, since the image motion and eye motion are equal in magnitude. The same computational rule must signify object's motion in the case of the after image. Absolute threshold. The absolute threshold is the point where something becomes noticeable to our senses. It is the softest sound we can hear or the slightest touch we can feel. Anything less than this goes unnoticed. The absolute threshold is therefore the point at which a stimulus goes from undetectable to detectable to our senses. Difference threshold. Once a stimulus becomes detectable to us, how do we recognize if this stimulus changes? When we notice the sound of the radio in the other room, how do we notice when it becomes louder? It is conceivable that someone could be turning it up so slightly that the difference is undetectable. The difference threshold is the amount of change needed for us to recognize that a change has occurred. This change is referred to as the just noticeable difference. Signal detection theory. Have you ever been in a crowded room with lots of people talking? Situations like that can make it difficult to focus on any particular stimulus, like the conversation we are having with a friend. We are often faced with the daunting task of focusing our attention on certain things while at the same time attempting to ignore the flood of information entering our senses. When we do this, we are making a determination as to what is important to sense and what is background noise. This concept is referred to as signal detection because we attempt to detect what we want to focus on and ignore or minimize everything else. Sensory adaptation. The last concept refers to stimuli which has become redundant or remains unchanged for an extended period of time. Ever wonder why we notice certain smells or sounds right away, and then after a while, they fade into the background. Once we adapt to the perfume or the ticking of the clock, we stop recognizing it. This process of becoming less sensitive to unchanging stimulus is referred to as sensory adaptation. After all, if it doesn't change, why do we need to constantly sense it? Organs of perception. Since objects or events are not experienced only through vision, the term perception obviously applies to other sense modalities as well. Certainly, objects and their movements may be experienced through the sense of touch. Such experiences derive from receptors in the skin, in brackets, tactile perception. But more importantly, from the positioning of the fingers with respect to one another when an object is grasped. The latter information arising from receptors in the muscles and joints, in brackets, haptic or tactile perception. The position of the parts of the body are also perceived with respect to one another, whether they are stationary, in bracket, proprioception, or in motion, in bracket, kinesthesis. Furthermore, the position of the body is experienced with respect to the environment through receptors sensitive to gravity, such as those in the vestibular apparatus in the inner ear. Auditory perception yields recognition of the location of sound sources and of structures such as melodies and speech. Other sense modalities, such as taste, in bracket, gustation, smell, in bracket, olfaction, pain, and temperature, provide sensory qualities, but not perceptual structures as do vision, audition, and touch, and thus are usually dealt with in sensory processes. Study session summary. In this study session, you explore the concept of sensation. Sensation refers to the process of sensing our environment through touch, taste, sight, sound, and smell. Perception is the way we interpret this sensation and therefore make sense of everything around us. The organs of perception include the eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue. In contemporary psychology, interests generally focus on perception or the apprehension of objects or events, rather than simply on sensation or sensory processes. End of study session 7. Thank you for listening.